What is going on, my fellow nerds? Operator Otter here, and today we're going to discuss how I was able to double the burst DPS of my cast on crit arc build by basically making this simple tree change. Now, this tree change was actually inspired to me by some of my viewers that came into my stream and said, hey, there is this new build going around that is going down on the right side of the tree into the monk part and grabbing specific things like energy shield and evasion and using choir storms to penetrate the lightning resistance with hypothermia to reduce the cold resistance, and then using cast on crit with comet to blow up the bosses and the rares. And I want to give that creator their flowers. This is Squishy Stormweaver Spark cast on crit. This is a very, very fun build, and I highly suggest running it if you do not have all of the gear applicable, because this is actually a very easy build to put together and very, very effective, very fun. Highly suggest it. But the main point that we're kind of trying to drive here is that going down into this tree and grabbing this extra mana cost with this conservative casting and being able to allocate this reduced mana cost, giving us an extra 23% reduced mana cost, really increase our damage that much? Yes, it does. And I'm going to mathematically prove how that happens in this video, as well as why every single Sorc build this season should be utilizing this, because the motto of Sorcs this season is basically, you have no mana! So without further ado, let's get started. So currently there are 4 meta builds in Dawn of the Hunt for the Sorceress, and those are the Frostbolt Cold Snap, the Choir of Storms Comet, the Cast on Crit Arc, and the Archmage Spark. And all of them suffer from the same problem, and that's mana. They just run out of mana and they cannot keep up their DPS. So 3 out of those 4 builds, being other than the Frostbolt Cold Snap, use Spark as either the thing that's going to trigger a spell and that spell costs mana, or using Archmage to empower the Spark to deal more damage, but now Spark costs a lot more mana. In this build, I have mana on every single piece of gear, as well as insane mana regeneration rate. It's a very cranked out build, and even with a low level Spark being 26, it should be 29, which would increase the mana by quite a bit. With only the acceleration multiplier, I cannot just stand here and cost Spark. I'm still getting low, so you can imagine how bad this is for other players who don't even have the gear that I have, and they're running out of Spark mana. But it gets even worse when you use something like Archmage. In this situation, now what we're going to do is just turn on Archmage, and this Archmage is level 20, which is the maximum level you can get, with the increased level to Lightning, which is reducing the cost of the spells to 6. That's the lowest you can get this. And now I'm going to cast my Spark, and now watch what happens. Yeah, that feels rough. That's real rough. There's not a lot of damage that we can do, especially if we decide that we're going to run Tempest. Now we're just completely out of mana immediately. Not a good time. So how do we solve this? This is an issue for every build. We need to solve the mana issue. So let's get to that and then show the results on that. Well, the way that most of the Archmage Sparks in the beginning of the season were solving this was that they would just run conservative casting in their amulet, and then as well they would just run inspiration on Spark. And now with that, with Archmage on, it would make it look like this. This is much more sustainable, much better. Still not exactly what we want, but it's much more sustainable, and it definitely does help us when we actually have something like Mana Tempest on, where now we are actually able to get about 2 to 3 more cast off in our burst cycle. So it's a nice change, but we can push it even further. The way that we're going to make this even better is, instead of allocating conservative casting, which, by the way, let's do like a quick tutorial on how to allocate something into your amulet. So if you go into your tree and you look over the node that you want to allocate, if you press Alt, it'll show you the order: Disgust, Disgust, Ire. These are the deliriums. If you go to your delirium and you click these, you pull them out, you will then right click them, you'll put the amulet right here, and you put the order of the deliriums in. It will show you what it's going to allocate, and then you can instill it. That's like the quick and down dirty guide on how to allocate specific passives into your amulet, in case you didn't know. Returning to our regular scheduled broadcasting, what we're going to do is, instead of allocating conservative casting, we're actually going to allocate mental toughness. Now, the thing about this amulet versus this one is this actually gives me 3 to all spell levels. This includes Spark. So Spark now goes from a 135 mana cost to a 196 mana cost. That's pretty substantial. And on top of that, it's also giving 20% increased cast speed. So it's pretty rough, but just wait. Now what we're going to do is, because we have now allocated mental toughness, we are now going to grab these mana skills. And from here, now let's see how it feels casting faster with the reduced mana cost and Archmage on. Yeah, that's wild. That's wild. Look how many more cast off we get in our Tempest cycle. This is this is wildly, wildly strong. And for a non-Archmage build, you can really keep up cast on shock forever. And if you're running a cast on crit, this is where things get even more busted. So now let's go into the mathematics behind what this does to builds that are cast on crits, because it's insane. So the main question that we have for cast on crit is how many triggered art casts can we get with the current mana pool that we have? Well, with my current mana pool, I have 2200 mana. Okay, well, how much does the actual arc cost at level 29? And the reason we say level 29 is we have 5 skills here, with 3 skills here, 2 skills here. That's a total of 10, which takes the arc from level 19 to level 29. So this is 284 mana. So the base cost of the arc is 284. And we know that with conservative casting, we are going to get 8% reduction in the mana cost of the skills when we allocate it within our amulet. So when we do the equation, it's 284 times 1 minus 0.08, which comes out to 262. This is the cost of the triggered art cast that we have when we are playing in the current build that we have right now. Now what happens is that when we put in all of the cost multipliers of our manual cost, the cost is now a level 30. So what happens is that when I go into the game, if I put in my lightning mastery, this now turns the cost to 322 because it's a level 30 gem. And then what happens is I have all of these cost multipliers being all of these gems right here. As you can see, 150 on the cost multiplier, 120 on the cost multiplier, 115, 120, so on and so forth. And what happens is each of these are multiplicative on top of one another. So we need to multiply all of them across. And then what happens is we multiply the mana cost reduction being 1 minus the 0.08, and now that manual cast of arc actually costs 736 mana. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create an equation. How many total art cast am I getting with 2200 mana with just conservative casting? Well, at 2200, I'm going to cast this 736. The 736 is going to get subtracted from the 2200. This leaves me with 1464 divided by the triggered art cast, which we decided was 262. And that gives us 5.58. Now we can't have point of a cast. It's either a whole number or not. So 5.58 is really just 5. So what we're getting is we're getting the Unleashed manual cast plus our 5 total triggered art cast. So now let's talk about what happens when we actually made the adjustments in the tree, with inspiration now actually being in the cast on critical. All right, so here's where the math gets kind of wonky, but we're going to go through it step by step, so bear with me, all right? So we know that the original art cast at level 29 is going to be 284, and with its new mana cost reduction, the mana cost reduction is actually additive with itself. It's not functioning off of a reverse multiplier like cooldown reduction. It actually adds itself like elemental resistance. And what this means to you math nerds out there is it actually gains value exponentially as we add it when it's reaching that 100%, which is insane. So very, very, very good stat, right? But the additive value of 15 plus 8 plus 4 plus 4, where are we getting the 4, 4, and 15? We are getting the 4, 4, 15 from here, here, and here. All right, so we get a total of 31%. So 1 minus 31% is going to be 69%. So 284 times 69%. Now, once that is done, the next part is then it takes in the support gem being your inspiration. Your inspiration says it reduces it by 30%. Okay, so this is going to be multiplied by 70%. And if we put that into the equation, as you can see here, when you round it up, the equation says that the arc cost should be 138. Well, let's see if that's true. We have an arc. It is level 29. The base cost is 284. We have our mental toughness allocated. We have our 4, 4, and 8 here, as well as the 15 from the allocation here. With the inspiration, as we take this arc cast down here, boom, 138. Ta-da! All right, so now the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually calculate how much it costs on the manual art cast. For the manual art cost, now we need to do the same thing that we did previously, where we're taking the 322 with the cost multipliers. The new thing now is that we have new mana cost reduction being the extra 4, 4, and 15%. So we just add those the same way that we had it before. It's the same equation. It's just instead of multiplying 1 minus 0.08, it's now 1 minus 0.31. And now the new art cost should equal 552. Let's see if we're correct on that. Okay, so if we go into game here, what we're going to do is we're going to put in all of them. So we have the Unleash, that's the 150%. We have the 120%. We have the 115%. We have the other 120%. And then we have the Lightning Mastery, which is turning it into the level 30. And then here's the 322 base mana. We said 552, right? Well, if we take this, we move it down here, 552. Shabam. All right, cool. So we have verified that these mana costs are correct in our theories, and now we need to actually calculate, well, how many triggered art casts are we getting with this new mana cost reduction? So what that means is that we're going to have these triggered arc casts at 138 value all the way until we hit that 770 mark. Once we bypass that 770 mark, we now need to recalculate what the mana cost of the triggered arc cast will be with no longer having 15%. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, we have the original being right here, 2200. We take that 2200, we subtract the 552, which is the manual arc cast of 552, and then we go into our triggered arcs. Now, we can get 7 triggered arcs until we hit below that 770 mark, which is right here, because at 820, we're still above 770, so it's going to apply the 138. Now at 682, we're below that. So what's the new arc cost being the triggered amount? Well, if we take 31% and we subtract 15%, we get 16%. So we just take 284 times 1 minus 16% times 1 minus 30% from the inspiration, and the new triggered arc cast is now 167. So from 682, the triggered arc cast now goes from 138 to 167, and then we do the same thing running it down, and we can see that the total triggered arc cast we get is 11. 11. That's more than double what we got over here. But with the new tree changes, we actually don't lose any DPS because of the fact that we're going down this direction to grab Crashing Wave, Critical Chance, and the increased cast speed with the Dexterity Intelligence. We're not losing any of the DPS anywhere we grab the points. This is why the damage has gone from this to this. It's literally double damage. We've gone from 3.5 million burst to 7 million burst just off of this trick, and that math lines up because, as we said, we've doubled the amount of triggered arc cast. So if you're running a cast on critical build, this is just a really easy way to double the damage of your burst cycle. And if you're running an archmage build or a cast on shock build, where you're trying to keep the DPS consistent throughout the cast or throughout the actual archmage mana demand, this is a really easy way to do that without ever going low on the mana, as we saw from the previous examples. So I hope that with this information, you guys are able to apply it and it will make your Sorc build much stronger and much more efficient. I think this is something that basically every single Sorc player should be doing, because the motto of Sorc players this season is, I'm out of mana. So hopefully this helps with that. Hopefully this improves the gameplay. I got nothing else for you. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Operator Otter,